in the recent recount in Georgia, which means nothing because they don't want to check signatures. And if you're not going to check signatures in Georgia, it doesn't work. But we have a Secretary of State and a governor who made it very difficult to check signatures. Why? You'll have to ask them. We will compare the signature on the envelope to the signatures from past elections, and we will find that many thousands of people signed these ballots illegally.
Cannot wait till this guy is gone. Welcome back to AM Joy. I'm Jason Johnson. Donald Trump is doing his level best to bring what he claims is massive voter fraud to America's attention in an attempt to overturn the results of the election. But he's getting a brutal reality check from state officials and judges who have slapped down almost all his legal challenges. In Michigan, his top-notch team put up a star witness whose viral testimony really sums up the legal efforts by the Trump campaign.
We're not seeing the poll book off by 30,000 votes. That's not the case.
What did you guys do? Take it and do something crazy to it?
I'm just saying the numbers are not off by 30,000 votes. So
I know what I
saying
saw.
That they're filling in?
I know what I saw, and I signed something saying that if I'm wrong, I can go to prison. Okay. Did you?
Yes, that was not a segment from Drunk History on Comedy Central. Also, ace lawyer Rudy Giuliani has led the way, trumpeting the supposed lack of witness transparency.
They didn't bother to interview a single witness. Just like you, they don't want to know the truth. Hugo Chavez, eventually she followed up with Maduro.
These antics have Americans riveted to their TV screens. Just listen to one of our favorite MSNBC viewers and frequent critic of my home during hits, Leslie Jones.
You know how sad you look, you stupid child? You up here with a chart that you can't even read. He can't even read this chart. He don't know what the that chart say. He don't know what the that chart say, you moron.
Joining me now, Tiffany Cross, author of Say It Louder, Black Voters, White Narratives, and Saving Our Democracy. I had no idea she'd written a book. Ellie Mistal, justice correspondent for The Nation. Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC contributor. And Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. You all are my anger translators this morning because we have a tremendous amount of ridiculosity to go through. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Mistal. When we look at Rudy Giuliani over the last several months, right, even before we got to this election, on a scale of Jackie Childs from Seinfeld to Saul Goodman from Breaking Bad, just how bad a lawyer has he been for Trump?
We're at Lionel Hutz territory from The Simpsons. That's how bad he's been. Right? And there's something that we can do about this. By the way, good morning, Jason. Thank you for having me. Hello, Tiffany. There's something we can do about this, right? They're called sanctions, Rule 11 sanctions. The federal rules of civil procedure provide that we can sanction lawyers who bring frivolous lawsuits with no chances of success. The Giuliani team has admitted that the only reason they brought certain lawsuits, for instance, the ones in Michigan, were to delay the certification of votes. That is an extra-legal outcome that they try to use the courts to do. So it would be very easy for people to file sanctions against these people and make them pay for what they've done, which is what needs to happen.
So this is the thing. It's not just that they're engaging in frivolous lawsuits, but they've also, we've seen throughout this Trump administration, pretty much turned the entire legal process into a pay-for-play game. And so, Mr. Butler, I'd like to ask you this question. What on earth should the American public think about this recent investigation that shows that people are attempting to buy pardons from the Trump administration? Is that something that we've ever seen in the past? And is this the kind of thing that Joe Biden is going to have to handle once he gets into office?
Yeah, so the Justice Department is investigating whether there was a pay-to-play bribery scheme in the White House where if you made a campaign donation, you got a pardon. And the investigation focused on this billionaire real estate developer who hired this connected D.C. lawyer to get clemency for another guy who was serving this long sentence. And the allegation was that the billionaire would make a substantial political contribution in exchange for the pardon. And the lawyer who was hired also represents Jared Kushner. So that raised a red flag. Now, in fact, The guy served the time. He never got the pardon. The Justice Department isn't saying much about where the investigation is now. But what prosecutors ask themselves is, does this sound like something Donald Trump would do? And the answer is yes. He's abused his power, his pardon power, almost from day one. He's used his power explicitly for his political and criminal interests. And we'll just have to see where this most recent investigation goes.
So basically, it's the classic WWDTD. And given the precedent that we've seen from this president, there's no reason to suspect that he wouldn't at least be open to the discussion of selling pardons. With that in mind, Joyce, I want to bring this to you. So right now, they're sort of rolling out this list in this administration of all the different kinds of people who they may pardon. Trump may pardon himself. He may pardon his children. He may pardon Joe Exotic. I'm sure lots of Tigers would be unhappy about that. You know, what is the likelihood that he will be able to get all of these pardons out? And more importantly, that there wouldn't be some sort of blowback to even Republicans in the Senate or local state prosecutors to try and continue after these people, even if they've been pardoned by the president?
You know, I feel like I'm watching Oprah, the pardon special. You get a pardon, you get a pardon, you get a pardon, as we watch these stories develop. And what it's difficult to express, Jason, is how different this is from the way the pardon process is supposed to work. It's a process that permits a president to offer mercy, to do justice in exceptional circumstances. Barack Obama used it rather famously across a wide group of defendants to make sentences more consistent after Congress changed the laws regarding sentencing under crack cocaine. It was a classic example of doing justice. All of those cases were individually reviewed, and prosecutors went back to judges and the original prosecutor and looked at records of conduct while in prison to make these decisions on a uniform basis across the country. So the Trump process, which is no process at all, right? It's you get a pardon if you're a family member, if your pardon might protect the president, or if it just appeals to him whimsically on any given day. It's not much of a process, and he can do it as readily, apparently, as by issuing a tweet and then requiring the bureaucrats in the background to write the paperwork to cover it up. So I think that we will see some, I'll use the word fascinating as a marker for horrific here, some really excessive abuse of the pardon process before this is all over.
Tiffany, there have been a lot of people over the last 4 years who've given President Trump and Jared Kushner all this credit for what they've done for criminal justice reform and how much they've done for Black America. But in this list of pardons that I see being floated around right now, I don't see a lot of people of color. I don't see a lot of black folk. I don't see a lot of African Americans who've been thrown in jail for ridiculous drug charges. Do you think there's any worth in maybe the CBC or people trying to plead with the president to actually pardon some African Americans? Or do you think that that was something he was only going to do when Lil Wayne was in his office and now he doesn't care?
Well, I don't want to say it's not worth it, because I know if I was someone who was needlessly ensnared in a very unforgiving criminal justice system, I would want everybody doing everything to try to reward me with some sort of life in this era. Now, how receptive will this president be? You know, I'm not sure, because he doesn't really have any public incentive to do this anymore. And he's, quite frankly, entangled in his own ridiculous legal battles. And this entire notion that Donald Trump and Jared Kushner did so much for Black people is as asinine as Mitch McConnell writing an op-ed about his role in the civil rights movement. It's quite ridiculous and, you know, unworthy of a segment on a show that the fabulous Dr. Jason Johnson is hosting. But I do just want to remind the audience that the first year that Donald Trump was in office, Jared and Ivanka Kushner made over $80 million while they were in office. The second year, that inflated to $135 million. So why might he be trying to pre-pardon his children in his last few days in office? And I'm really curious how this will all play out. Jason, you know, being raised in households like we were raised to distrust the system. Everyone around me keeps saying the system is going to work. He's going to leave. These people are the human embodiment of why we are so distrustful of a system that has routinely and historically and consistently harmed us. And so now we see the results of centuries of white supremacy that have elevated this very below average, basic, unintelligent man to the highest office in the land. It's his first job in government, being president of the United States. And here we are in the grips of a global pandemic that disproportionately harms Black and brown folks, and an increasingly problematic economy, while these bread lines are getting longer. And I should point out that he's also rushing through executions, federal executions at this point in his presidency. So I am terrified of what's to come, but I do anticipate that that the war is not over, that there are still battles to be fought as he is the outgoing president, and I hope that he eventually accepts that.
So, Joyce, similar to Tiffany, look, I don't trust the system. There's no reason to trust the system, certainly when it comes to Black and brown people and the poor in this country. But one thing that I do always trust about politicians is they will do the thing that is most necessary for their careers to be advanced. What do you think is the likelihood that as Trump hands out pardons maybe at the federal level, that you will see local prosecutors in different states think, wait a minute, if I can find some tangential connection between a Trump business and my state, I'm going to court against this guy. Do you think we could see a generation of prosecutors going after Trump and his associates and his families as a way to sort of advance their own careers at the state level?
One of the most fascinating features of the legal landscape here is that traditionally state prosecutors have stepped aside to let the federal government prosecute corruption cases. The federal government has more resources, it moves more quickly, the sentences tend to be longer. But I think that your question is an important one to ask here. We know Cy Vance in Manhattan is pushing cases on the Trumps. Mimi Rocha will be the district attorney in Westchester County. She will likely have jurisdiction over some Trump-related cases. We don't know what other state and local DAs will proceed, but I suspect that they will pick up the slack if there is any. And I would be remiss if I didn't pick up on Tiffany's point about concerns about this Justice Department and this speed up in executions as it draws to a close, to make the point that this week I was proud to be one of over 100 prosecutors, state and federal, Democrat and Republican, who wrote to say that the death penalty is something that this country should no longer push forward with, that it's outmoded and unfair. And perhaps what we will see as state prosecutors take on responsibility for the corruption cases is that this push to reform the criminal justice system, to end the use of the death penalty, will also come from them as well.
Ellie, when I look at the sort of head of this hydra, the head of the snake, it is Rudy Giuliani. He is the one who's leading all of these sort of ridiculous lawyers on this chasing windmills attacks on our elections and delays and everything else like that. Who do you think is going to step up first to try to get Giuliani disbarred? Or do you think he's going to somehow come out of this administration and still be able to practice the ridiculous abuse of law that he's been engaging in for the last couple of years?
Man, Giuliani doesn't practice law. He works next door, all right? He hasn't been a real lawyer for years. There's already a move. Bill Parcells Jr. of New Jersey has already made a move to bring ethics complaints against Giuliani at the bar. Hopefully those go forward. Look, Giuliani is the one that needs the pardon the most, because he is the person, I believe, that the Southern District of New York has squared up in their sights. So he probably needs the get out of jail free card the most. But I would caution listeners to think about it this way. Yes, there is a chance that Trump will pardon Giuliani and his entire trifling family. There's a chance that Trump will pardon himself. But the one thing I know about Trump and Trump people is that their business is crime. Their modus operandi is crime. So if they pardon themselves for everything that's happened already, these people aren't Timothy Dalton. They don't get a license to kill. They will commit more crime going forward. I mean, do you think the Trump library is going to spend all that money on books? Come on. So, like, the crimes that will happen going forward are also crimes that we can prosecute. I agree with Joyce. We have Tish James. We have Xavier Becerra. Mimi Rocha is literally my DA in my town. There will be opportunities to prosecute these people, regardless if they abuse the pardon power as they are thinking.
Hopefully, Ellie, there will be a skyfall on this entire crime family, and there will be another day for them to die. Paul, so we have a story in Florida, a lawyer actually encouraging people to basically commit voter fraud. And he's telling people, hey, vote once, twice, 3 times a lady. In Georgia, what will be the requirement, or what would it take, again, for the bar in Florida to say, hey, look, you should lose your law license, or Georgia say, hey, look, if you step foot in this state, you will get arrested? Are we seeing sort of a move at the state level to say, look, some of these cranks who are coming forward and saying these things publicly, I don't care if you say it's a joke. I don't care if you say it's free speech. This is a violation of your oath as sort of a purveyor and someone who's responsible for the law.
So this week, Trump's lawyers lost in all 6 states where Trump was contesting the vote. In Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, Wisconsin, the election results were certified. And to your point, Jason, the remarkable thing is how these judges are throwing shade at Trump's legal team. A conservative justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court said it was the weakest case he had ever seen. And if Trump's lawyers got their way, it would do indelible damage to every future election. So as far as the judiciary is concerned, the election is game over. It's done, and Joe Biden is the president-elect. And again, if we're thinking about bad lawyers, we have to go right back to Rudy Giuliani. We saw in that earlier clip you showed him telling that witness to be quiet, shut up, you're making a fool of yourself. If Giuliani, he's not an expert on election law, he's not really an expert on any kind of law, but he knows a lot about making a fool of himself. So if he's telling another witness to shut up because you're making a fool of yourself, you're best to shut up.
Yes, he really did sort of trumpet to her that was a problem. Tiffany, I want to close on this. You made a really, really good point about Trump rushing through all these executions, primarily of black and brown people, before he gets out of office. Heading into a new administration with Joe Biden and Senator soon-to-be Vice President Kamala Harris, are we going to see a move away, even more moves away from the death penalty? Do you think this new administration is going to make it even more difficult for states to sort of execute people, or do you think they'll sort of say status quo by trying to decriminalize certain acts that lead to potential death penalty charges?
I do, Jason. I really do, because you have to look at the electorate who helped put them in the White House, and they're going to be facing an increasingly progressive Congress, one of the most diverse sessions of Congress we've ever seen, as it is increasingly so. So I can't imagine that this is something that they would allow. And this is, I think, one of the flaws in the First Step Act, that people think, oh, we passed the First Step Act, so glad we got rid of that whole, racial problem that we had in this country. The First Step Act is called that because a second and third step act needs to happen. And a lot of these convictions, a lot of the pipelines that send black and brown people to prison happen at the state level. So I think this is something that they're going to have to certainly address at the federal level, but people should keep in mind that a lot of this happens at the state level, so those state level elections are just as important.
Thank you. That is a really, really key point. And for some reason, Tiffany's actually going to be back on the show later. But for now, thank you, Elie Mystal, Joyce Vance, and Paul Butler. More AM Joy after the break.